tamponade. So I'm going to tell you when to put the balloon tamponade in. When is the indication first? So the time to put it is actually when your medical treatment fails. I mentioned about the term emotive. Can you all remember early detection of PITA, postpartum massage, oxytocin, tranexamic acid, IV fluids, examination. So we had to examine, make sure there's no tears, no retained tissue, she's bleeding because of uterine atony. That's where the balloon tamponade comes in. So you start an IV fluid with a 14 or 16 gauge cannula, so you can put in enough IV fluids. Then you give oxytocin, you give tranexamic acid 1 gram, and apply bimanual compression. Bimanual compression has to be at least for 10 minutes because the clotting time, if you take a blood and shake it, it takes about 8 minutes, and bleeding time with a yellow puncture takes 8 to 10 minutes. So you must keep the pressure for 8 to 10 minutes. So you are given tranexamic everything, and you take the hand out, she is bleeding, or she is intermittently bleeding, then it's not going to work, your bimanual compression tranexamic acid. So that's the time you put the balloon tamponade in. You must know when not to put it in. When not to put it in, if there's sepsis, then it might be a problem. Or if she is already hemodynamically unstable, the blood pressure is dropped and the pulse is very rapid, then you don't want to waste time, you want to go straight for laparotomy. Or if there is clotting problem, she's pouring blood but blood is not clotting, then these conservative measures are not going to work. She will continue to bleed. So not to put it in if there's coagulation problem, hemodynamically unstable, or there's obvious sepsis, then you don't want to put a foreign body in. Unless you are desperate, you can, but you can have a chance of perforating their sepsis. So that's not to put it in. Putting in oxytocin, tranexamic acid, bimanual compression, not working, you put the balloon tamponade. Now there's a trick in putting the balloon tamponade in, and I'm going to tell you the trick. If you don't know the trick, you will struggle. This is a model prepared to teach how to put a postpartum intrauterine device. So what happens is when you put a speculum in and look at the cervix, hold the anterior lip of the cervix with one of the sponge forceps. So you can hold the anterior lip of the cervix, I can see from here. You can hold it like that, and then you are going to put another sponge forceps or a Kelly's forceps. Sponge forceps is only 24 centimeters long, so you can't put it right to the fundus. Curved Kelly's is 33 centimeters long, so if you have that, that is better to hold whatever instrument you are going to put in, or the cannula you are going to put it in. You take it and put it into the cervical canal, but don't push it in because the uterus is bent a little bit anteriorly after delivery. So after you keep the catheter in the cervical canal, you push on the uterine fundus. You can see it is bent. If you push it, it will go onto the posterior uterine wall and won't move. But if you push on the uterine fundus and lift it up, then it becomes like a straight path, vagina, cervix, uterine cavity. So once you put it into the cervical canal, then you can go in very quickly and put as maximum as possible, and so you see you are in the uterine cavity. Then you release the balloon and take the forceps out and ask somebody to fill the balloon with fluid, whatever balloon you are using. Either you can put a bag of IV fluids and squeeze, or you can get a 50cc syringe and put the balloon, and you can use warm saline or warm water is better because it promotes the clotting cascade. And you keep on putting, and you are the person who is at the bottom, you are observing in the cervical canal whether the blood is coming out or not. So while you're observing and the bleeding stops, that's all you have to put in. So it might be 200 ml, it might be 250, 300 ml. Once the bleeding stops, that's all. You can put another 50 ml if you like as an insurer, and you can come out. But you put 250, 300, 350, 400, it's not continuing to bleed. Then you have to observe whether the balloon is seen in the cervical canal. So it is trying to distend the cervical canal, and she is continuing to bleed, then it's a failure. It's not going to stop, and if you put more, the balloon is going to come out. So if it's seen but no bleeding, then that's okay. You can wipe it and put a gauze pack in. So how much of fluid to put in is on two observations. One is when the bleeding stops, whatever the amount you put in, or when the balloon is seen and trying to see more and more of the balloon at the cervical canal, and she's bleeding, then you have to take her to the theatre. If she's already in the theatre, you have to think of laparotomy and compression suture. Otherwise, you have to think of okay, you're filming. I hope people
Yes.
Right.
Hold the picture for her.
Okay. So that's how much of fluid you put in. And if it has stopped bleeding, then you ask them to put a syntocinon infusion, 10 units or 20 units, it doesn't matter, to keep the uterus contracted, and give prophylactic antibiotics, which is like a cephalosporin or something.
Single dose?
Single dose, unless you want to keep the catheter for more than 6 hours, 8 hours, then you give repeat doses. So otherwise you give a single dose, which is enough. And then what you do is take a pen, with a ballpoint pen, and mark the height of the fundus there on the lateral floor. Mark the height of the fundus. And ideally you must have a urinary catheter, because you want to measure the urinary flow as well. Every hour how much urine she is putting in. So you have a mark, a urinary catheter, IV fluids with oxytocin, antibiotic, you're done. Then you take the notes and put 13 hours balloon inserted. And on the horizontal axis, you put 13, 13, 15, 13, 30, 13, 45, 14, like a chronological order. On the vertical axis, you write pulse, blood pressure, temperature, urinary output, funnel height. Whether it's 0, that means at the same level, or +1, it is going up. That is the funnel height, and any vaginal bleeding, then you note it down. So once you note it down, and if you have opportunity to do a hemoglobin, you put that as well. So you're observing, not hemoglobin you don't have to do every 15 minutes, you do once, and then if it is low, after you have to think whether to give blood and so on, and then repeat it up a couple of hours later. Clinical observation, pulse, blood pressure, temperature, urinary output, you do it every 15 minutes to see how it is happening. Then if she is stable, the pulse, blood pressure, everything is stable, or urinary output improving, pulse is getting better, then you keep her till such time you want to take the catheter or balloon out. So you can keep the balloon for 2 hours, that's more than enough, but depending on the time, whether it's early hours of the morning, middle of the night, you don't want to take it out when nobody's around. You wait to a suitable time, and if you want to give blood, you can give blood, or fluids, you can give more fluids. And then you deflate the balloon. You take the fluid out and keep the catheter there without removing for 30 minutes. This is in case there was a cervical laceration or a malformation of the vessels. Then you will get fresh bleeding coming, watery blood. So you keep a pad, and if it is watery blood, then that means she's going to bleed. Then you put the fluid back again and take it to the theatre to examine. If she's no bleeding for 30 minutes, you can take the catheter out, or the balloon out. And when you're observing after you take the balloon out, you have to really note whether the bleeding is there. You can say no bleeding, or if the blood is coming, then you have to make one observation. That is, when you put a pad in between the perineum and the vulva, you lift the pad and you see mucoid strand of blood going, then you write mucoid blood. That means you stop bleeding. But if it is watery blood, then you write watery blood, which means he needs more observations. So you have to make a distinction. The mucoid is like a lochia type of blood. Then watery. So you must, every time you take it out, you must use a fresh pad so you can have observation. If there are no staining, you can keep the pad, but if the pad is stained, then you have to remove and put another pad. So you make the observation whether she's bleeding, watery blood, mucoid blood. And if the observations can be then, if everything is stable, you can convert to half an hour observations, then 1 hour observation, 2 hour observation, go to 4 hours. So that's all you have to do in terms of keeping the catheter. In terms of which catheter to use, there are different catheters which are available. So you go to the hospital and find out which catheters are available, where they are kept, because sometimes you don't know where they keep it. They hide it somewhere or else. So you must know whether you are having a modified Rush balloon catheter. This is a modified Rush balloon catheter. You can have an Ebbs catheter, you can pass it around. So the Ebbs catheter is something very special. You have a uterine balloon, you put it in as I mentioned, you fill the fluid, and when it has stopped bleeding, then you have a lever here. You press on that and adjust the length to push it against the cervix and fill the vaginal balloon in. In the others, you might have to put a gauze pack. This one, the balloon itself will help, and you can keep it in place. And there are drainage channels marked. As for drainage, irrigation, uterine, vaginal, you can fill as you need. So that is Ebb's balloon, you can pass it around. And this is Rush balloon, you can pass it around. And there's a Buckley balloon somewhere here. And that is Sengstaken tube. That's the Buckley here, you can pass it around. And the Sengstaken tube comes in different shapes and sizes. And this is with an esophageal balloon and a stomach balloon. Now Sengstaken is available with only the stomach balloon. So if you're going to get some Sengstaken tube for the labor ward, don't buy the whole set because that's expensive. This is for esophageal varices. So you can buy only with the stomach balloon. The tip is a little bit long, you can cut it off. And you can use the stomach Sengstaken tube, you can use an Ebbs, you can use a Buckley. And if you have no facilities, then you can use a condom tied to a plastic catheter or a Foley's catheter. But when you're tying, as you can see, it's all a lot of leak here. That's because if you tie it only in one place, it'll slip. So if you're using a condom, because there's lubrication there, you tie it, then you take it around and tie it at another level, take it around and tie it at another level. 3 or 4 knocks you have to tie. Now, if you don't have condom available in the labor ward, which very unlikely people have condom in the labor ward, you can take, and no other balloons available, take a sterile glove, size 8 or 7.5 glove, tie this end completely with O1 because the rubber glove you can tie it. This is plastic glove, you can't use a plastic glove, a rubber glove you tie it. Take the middle finger and cut the tip of the middle finger. And get an IV set, IV cannula set, and the drip set can go into the cut middle finger, and you can tie it with the other 2 fingers or with a thread, and then you can put this balloon as such inside, holding the sponge forceps, and fill the fluid by squeezing the bag or putting some fluid through. So you can use a condom is used in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and so on. Rubber glove is used in South Africa, they use it very effectively, but if you have fancy stuff, you can use any of the other things you have. And as I mentioned, you keep it for a certain number of hours. Now, one more thing, or 2 more things to tell, is there are some which are what they call as an open balloon system. So you put the balloon here and you connect it to a tubing and to a canister, like we have seen enema cans, connected to rubber tubing for enema. Those days they used to do that. So you can connect to the end of that cannula so that when the uterus contracts, the water will rise in the enema can. If she bleeds, you can raise the canister and more fluid will go into the uterine canal. So that's called the open system of balloon. It's available as an open system, not a closed system. The next thing to remember is if you do an ultrasound scan after the bleeding has stopped, sometimes you find the upper uterine segment is well contracted, narrow shallow, the whole balloon is in the lower segment. But that doesn't matter. As long as you stop bleeding, that doesn't matter because it can remain in the, we call it the S1 segment and the S2 segment. So isthmic portion doesn't have much muscle and there's a lower attachment of the placenta, it bleeds from there. So you can have an isthmic balloon, but you don't have to worry as long as she's bleeding. You can do an ultrasound, but clinically if she has stopped bleeding, then there is no need. But if you do an ultrasound and you see the balloon lower down in the uterus, you don't have to replace it. You just leave it there and it'll stop bleeding, you can deflate and take it out. So just to recap, when you put it is when you try the EMOT bubble, oxytocin, ergometrine, IV fluid, use. When you go back to the unit, see that you keep only the 14 and 16 gauge cannula needles there, orange and gray.
16.
There's a green needle, white needles, pack it and send it to the pediatric ward. That'll be a big for the women, because otherwise you can't give much fluid with other cannulas. So you put an IV cannula, give ergometrine or cetirizine or prostaglandin or whatever you want to give tranexamic acid, bimanual compression, 10 minutes, still she's bleeding, then you might have to get the balloon tamponade. And you have to put a speculum, hold the anterior lip of the cervix, take the catheter, keep it in the cervical canal, don't push it, keep it in the cervical canal, push on the fundus, lift it up so it becomes straight, then you put it as much as you can, release it and ask somebody to fill, and with the speculum you can take a swab on holder and see whether she's bleeding. If the bleeding stops here, put another 50 ml and stop it at that. And start IV antibiotics, IV syntocinon, put a mark, start an observation chart, including the urinary output, check the hemoglobin at least once just to make sure, and decide when the pulse, blood pressure, temperature, everything is stable, good urinary output, then you can deflate the catheter, leave it for 30 minutes, and then you can say that she is safe, there's no other problem there. And, but not to put it in if there's clotting. You can still put it in with hemodynamic will be stable, but you have to correct the clotting factors, otherwise it won't clot, blood won't clot in the cavity. Question time.
We will empty the balloons gradually, not suddenly. We
Yeah,
remove
we
all
have
the
done studies of gradual emptying versus one-time emptying. It doesn't matter because once you empty a little bit, the pressure is taken, she is going to bleed. If you empty completely, she's still going to bleed. If she's going to bleed. So gradual emptying doesn't help, but don't take it out. Just keep it there.
keep the balloon.
Because in case there is a cervical laceration or a malformation and she bleeds, fresh bleeding, watery blood, then you can blow it up again. Yeah, so when you are about to deflate, keep some warm saline available so that if she continues to bleed, you can put it back.
Does we need the uterotonic agent? Does we need uterotonic agent with deflation or not?
No, you can give the oxytocin, you can't give it for a long time because oxytocin is an antidiuretic effect. So if she has stopped bleeding for 2 to 4 hours, that means there's no height increase in the fundus, no vaginal bleeding 2 to 3 hours. Whatever oxytocin, this oxytocin you put 10 or 20 units, you can take it up to 4 to 6 hours depending on it. And after that you can discontinue the oxytocin. You can still have a saline drip if you want to. But oxytocin might cause complications with antidiuresis. We don't continue oxytocin. Once she stops bleeding, that's all.
Doctor, after the bleeding stops, observation time, then we remove is how many minutes? 30 minutes?
Yeah, so if you do it every 15 minutes for the first hour and if it is stable, then you can convert to every 30 minutes. If it is stable, then you can convert to every hour. So you increase the inter-observer time depending on parameters. If the pulse is still high, she's a little bit trickling, a little bit something, then every 15 minutes. But if it's stable, the pulse is 88, blood pressure 110, 80, 110, 80, 180. Urinary output is for an hour is more than 30 and then half an hour is okay. 2 observations, a half hour is okay. Make it hourly. When the balloon is taken, make it 2 hourly and then 4 hourly and then back to 6 hourly. Whichever the observations are made in the normal patient. So you can space it as long as the observations are stable. If the observations are abnormal, then 15 days you have to continue.
What is the difference between if we keep the back of the balloon? At least for how long minimum we have to keep it inside there?
2 hours is enough, but if you want to keep it, so normally what we say is keep it
2 hours.
this time you are comfortable, the patient is okay.
Okay.
And so the observations are alright, and she has no bleeding, the fundal height is the same. She has no pain, no discomfort. The hemoglobin you check is normal. So before you take it out, it's good to check the hemoglobin. And check the urinary output. Check the pulse, blood pressure. Everything is stable, then you can take it out. Say for example, you are thinking of taking it out at the end of 4 hours, but the hemoglobin is 6 grams, 7 grams. Then you can keep it, you give the blood.
Then at least. But how maximum we can keep it? Like 24 hours?
Or you can keep it 24 hours, but if you keep it for 24 hours, then you have to give additional dose of antibiotics.
Okay.
So because you're keeping a catheter going from the
Yeah,
spine.
exactly. Yeah.
Doctor, will it harm the uterus if we let the Bakri balloon stay for a longer time, like 24 hours?
No, cover with antibiotics and then it should be alright.
Okay.
Because the idea is actually to not to let the infection set in. So if you cover it, say if you keep it for 24 hours, you give 6 hours antibiotics. It's different. So antibiotics, some other antibiotics, some are given 8 hours. So depending on the antibiotics you choose.
Usually, how many ml we will see?
Sorry?
How many ml? Around 200 ml, 300 ml. How much?
How much to put it in? Yeah, you put it in till such time you see no bleeding. So in some, it might stop at 100 ml, some 150 ml, some 200 ml. So you keep putting till the bleeding stops. But if she keeps on bleeding, you can go up till such time the balloon is seen on the cervical canal.
Till the balloons.
So
it will come out.
That's right. If you put more, it is going to come out. So you stop there, and if she's bleeding, then she needs some other thing done. But if she stops bleeding, even when the balloon is seen, then you put a pack in, and that should help from expelling. And then you observe.
What is the difference between the closed and the open system?
The closed system is you put everything and then you plant the catheter with the balloon there. It's not connected to an IV line. IV line for the patient is going, but no cannula system. Open system is you take the end of the system, like this system where the drainage is coming. So you put it to a canister. So this is inside the uterus. So if the uterus contracts and the balloon shrinks, then the fluid go back into the canister. So it's the only difference is you connect, instead of a urine bag to collect the blood, you connect this to a cannula with a canister. You know the canister?
Yeah.
Right, the enema thing there, and then you put it in. And if she bleeds, then you raise the cannula, like, so that more fluid will go in. And if you use a transparent cannula like a glass jar, then you can see when she contracts, the level of water will go up. When she relaxes, it will come down. So you can, that's the
But
called.
it cannot slip. It's inside, not this balloon. This balloon, I will fill it. The cannula system connected by this one. Am I
The
correct?
cannula system is connected to the end of the output.
Okay.
So normally what we do is we connect it to a urine bag.
Yeah. So this
So the
one,
blood will come in there. That is a closed system. Open system is instead of collecting to the urine bag, you put it to the, so that not the drainage system, but the balloon
the balloon is in place. Yeah.
inflating system, you connect it to that. And so if the uterus contracts, the level of the water in the cannula or canister will go up. And if it bleeds, then you raise the canister, so more fluid will come back. So it's not to the outflow tract, but to the filling channel. So that's
Which
called-
one is better?
Both are okay. Usually the principle is to stop the bleeding with the tamponade. So once it has stopped,
بس
whichever.
if blood coming up, does that mean that patient
No.
bleeds?
No, the outflow tract is to see whether there is any blood from outside the balloon, but from within the uterine cavity is coming through the outflow tract. So this is kept open, and to collect this, we put a urine bag here, so that the blood will collect in the urine bag.
Yeah, this is the closed. The closed.
That's the closed system.
Yeah, the open system.
Open system still you connect it to the urine bag,
Yeah.
but if this one the stop clock is closed so that you can't put anything. But you connect this to a cannula with a canister and open this. So once you open this like that,
Yeah.
if the uterus contracts and the balloon shrinks,
Okay.
the fluid will come up and go up to the canister. And if she bleeds a little bit, you want to increase the pressure on the balloon, you raise the canister a little bit at a higher level. So more fluid will go down. So that's the open system. So there's a closed open system, the port has to go into where you fill the balloon with the fluid.
The closed system.
The closed system and the open system, the drainage has to be connected to the urine.
When you see like a drain, like it's too much coming and no, you have to remove the bacterial balloon. There is limit or no limit?
No, there's, if it is of alarming amount, then that is not going to work. But very unlikely there will be bleeding coming from the suction cannula.